Substitution. So we're trying to solve the system or find the solution, which really means find the POI. Again, we could graph it, and sometimes it would work. I'm going to tell you, looking at these, you can be able to do it with graphing because they're pretty solid, easy integers, but you need to know how to do it using substitution as well. Substitution, you've already learned. Substitution is when you take a number and you put it in. So if I said x equals 3, you could sub it in for x, and you would replace the x with a 3. We're going to do that same idea using something when we understand what a system is. In our system, we're going to have two lines, and they're going to intersect at a point. What I know is that at that point, the x and y values are the same for both equations. So when I look at these equations, if I only care about that point of intersection, then I can assume that this y value is the same as this y value, y equals y. That makes sense because at that point, they are the same. They are sharing a y value. So what I'm going to do is, if I told you y equals 5, you would have no problem putting a 5 there. You would sub in the 5, no problem. What I'm going to tell you is that instead of y equaling 5, it equals negative 2x plus 5, which is what that is right there. We're going to take that entire complicated thing and sub it in for y. And it's going to look, and it's going to look like this. Negative 2x plus 5 equals 2x plus 1. This is great. The reason this is great is because we can solve it. It only has one variable. It only has x. That's good. Before it had x and y, so we wouldn't be able to actually find out what x was. So we're going to use some algebra to rearrange. So it's going to be, we'll move the 1 to that side and the negative 2 to that side. So 4 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4. X is equal to 1. This is great. This is where most students make a mistake because they forget what we were looking for. The question asks us to find the POI. A POI has an x and a y value. We found the x value, so now we need to use this and sub it into the equation to find the y value. If you forget and you're having trouble like getting the question right, I like to write at the start of my question, x equals y equals. Because when I find the answer, I'll put a 1 there and say, oh, right, I'm not done. I have to keep going. So I'm going to sub this in to one of the equations at the start. You could sub it in here if you wanted. No, you couldn't because there's no y value, so don't sub it there. There's also, if you made a mistake, it won't work. So sub it in one of the original equations. I'm going to do y equals 2x plus 1, y equals 2 times 1 plus 1, y equals 3. So now I have my point, and you need your therefore statement, which is something like this. Therefore, POI is 1, 3. Didn't want to mess that up. That's it. That's how we use substitution. You will do questions where you're doing quadratic questions. It'll work the same way. The only thing that'll be different is eventually you'll get to a part where it'll say something like this. Eventually you'll get to a point like this after you use substitution, and then what you'll need to do is you'll need to factor. After you've factored and you found out what the actual roots are, those will be your x values that you need to sub in. And remember, if you have quadratic, you're going to have two solutions. You're going to have two POIs. That's why you're going to have two roots that are going to be your two answers. And you need to sub both in separately to find the answers.